So this evening we're talking about Jamaica Broilers. Their third quarter results are out. How are they doing? Because there's been quite a bit of news coming out of broilers.
Well, it wasn't pretty. That's one thing for
Mm.
sure. So, a lot of persons, saw the delay in the quarterly report, and then, the report came out on Thursday, just before markets open, and you just saw this $1.115 billion loss, which came as a surprise to many persons, compared to the $1.3 billion net profit they would have had in the prior period for the Q3. So, that came as a massive surprise to a lot of persons. And as a result, the price has taken quite the nosedive. So for Jamaica Broilers right now, it's at $28.10. I think that's the last closing price. So it's done 22% year to date. So a lot of persons are, you know, not happy, especially for like the Mayberry Jamaican Equities, which is the fifth largest shareholder in Jamaica Broilers. So
Wow.
I know those folks are not happy over there with the state of affairs as to the fact that the price has dropped. But hey, in every crash there's opportunity. So similarly to how Dolphin Co stock price decline, resulting in some persons buying at 11.90 and total are selling back at 19. Some persons about Jamaica brought at 27 yesterday and probably could have been able to sell at $30 by the end of yesterday. So some persons are making profit in the correction phase in a sense, but a lot of persons are visibly concerned at the state of affairs because there was a briefing that they had at their head office by McCook's Pen in St. Catherine, and what they pointed out was that the reason for that massive spike in the costs for the Q3 was largely because there are invoices that should have been posted in the prior periods that were just being posted all at once in the third quarter. That's from the US's operations. So as a result, you had this massive spike in costs, you know, and it's costs that have been incurred in the prior period. They're just recording it in the current period to allow for investors to know what's kind of happening. But yeah, the US operations had a $13 million US net loss and dragged the overall group into a net loss. And they've sacked the entire USA management team. They're putting in steps to ensure that there are more controls in the business to have better monitoring and oversight. But it's just one of those interesting things I just look back to because we would have seen, Dolphin Co. stock price diving recently. Even today, the company announced that their artificial are delayed because of the bankruptcy situation with their parent company in Mexico. So, in the case of Jamaica Broilers, it's one of those situations as well where you're just seeing tough results, and the market is trying to just process the information as best as it can because one thing that I asked Christopher Levy, and I hope he can actually come on the program and answer questions to the general public, was about potential restatements for the prior years. He couldn't give a comment on it, but if we're seeing these kind of invoice, inputs for this recent report, what's happened with the respective prior periods and any potential restatements. So it just appeared right now of uncertainty, and I think the Jamaica Bar is still a more stronger job to ensure the public can understand what's still taking place with the business.
Now, for those of us who are wondering, those of you who are wondering, why was Jamaica Broilers performance so dismal? A lot of it had to do with the U.S. operations, right, David? Tell us what was going on there. Give us the update.
Well, there are things that are considered hearsay, and there are things that are considered fact. So let's look at the facts for this case. So basically, the USA management team, apparently wasn't as focused on cost control. The company also pointed out in the session that, chicken prices would have declined during that period. So chicken prices went from like $1.80 per pound to like as low as $1.15. They mentioned that there were some weather events during the period. So like I think it was the hurricanes along the southern belt. The Jamaica Brothers operates like in South Carolina. I believe they operate in Georgia. So they operate in a couple of states on the eastern seaboard or the eastern side of the USA. And basically there were just things that should have been happening at Jamaica Broilers USA that weren't happening. And it's unfortunate because when you appreciate the fact that chicken as a commodity is so valuable and this is Jamaica Broilers' strongest growing division, it's truly a sad thing to look at. But at the same time, it's somewhat of a blessing because at least now the USA business is going to get a lot more oversight, which is likely going to generate better returns for shareholders. What do I mean by that? So, during the briefing, Christopher Lee mentioned that their plant yield at their processing plant, either in Georgia or South Carolina, right? That's for the chicken processing plant. They said the yield was like 57%, when they went in, and within 2 weeks, it was up to 62%. So you're talking about a 5% increase in yield of chicken being processed just because Jamaica management stepped in and took over the operational control of the business. So when you think about that, when you think about the fact that you have the growing egg business, and we've seen the recent spike in egg prices, and the fact that Jamaica Broilers does have a relatively growing position in the competitive US market, they do have some level of significant forward step. But I think this hurdle right now is relatively just a major headache for many people, because one thing that was mentioned as well was that vendors in the USA, persons that provide services to Jamaica Broilers USA, they were not being paid, and that was affecting the relationships they had out here in Jamaica. Potentially the vendors always were contacting vendors here in Jamaica, saying this was happening, and that's one part of it. And they mentioned as well that the profit being generated wasn't matching the cash in the accounts. So to be honest, the USA situation, what is known and is fact, is pretty unfortunate.
You mentioned that we should reach out to Mr. Levy to have him on the show. We did invite him on earlier this year, and he declined. And now we understand why. Now we can see why he declined that interview. But we had invited him on actually because when we did our annual year in review show, 3 out of our 5 analysts had pointed to Jamaica Broilers as one of the stocks to watch for 2025, and well, they weren't wrong. It is a stock to watch, I guess, but maybe not for the reasons that they had anticipated at the time. But does this report change all of that forecast for broilers? Do you think they can turn it around?
They can turn it around, but one thing that's going to be of concern to analysts is knowing where Jamaica Broilers actually stands, because for Jamaica Broilers to mention operational control issues, that's a serious red flag. So this is something that I'd like to explain, because a lot of persons don't tend to appreciate, the financial reporting process. So, for example, let us say you go to a supermarket, Kalila, right? You take up, let us say, a candy bar. Take the candy bar to the cashier, pay for the product. A couple of things happen there. For one, revenue is recorded on the sale of the candy bar. And then at the same time, inventory goes down and cash increases. So when you do transactions, in a business, different parts of the balance sheet are affected alongside the income statement as things take place. Now, most people don't know that the company is what prepares the financial statements for the auditors who come in and do certain checks. So, when the auditors, prepare the financial statements, they might have a particular preparation style that you tend to notice from time to time that is kind of standardized, but it's really the company that prepares the financial statements, right? Auditor comes in and is testing for controls, testing for cash movement and so on. So for example, they will contact the bank, they will contact the JCSD, for example, if they own equities. They're going to verify with external parties and say, hey, the company do this, the company do that. And based on those controls, they will say, hey, based on our observations and opinion, these financial statements, appear to be true and fair. Now, when you have this mention of operational control deficiencies, it's a major problem because the artists are going to have to go back in and have a lot more scrutiny on the business. And it's a problem for the artists as well. In this case, this will be likely in PwC USA because, person going to ask, how did they not see some of these things when they're doing their review? But something that my, learned accountant friend, told me was that in auditing, you take samples. So you tend to look at the larger value accounts. So for the larger vendors, the larger suppliers, the larger customers, those are the persons you contact and say, hey, did XYZ sell this amount of product? Can you confirm this? Did you sign a contract with this person? So when it comes to financial reporting, there's a lot that persons don't tend to appreciate. And right now, from the analyst community at least, they're very concerned because for them, they're trying to understand, is what we're seeing in Jamaica Broilers right now likely to lead to restatements for the prior years? And if so, how far back does it go? So let us look back at an example last year with Productive Business Solutions, PBS, and their situation, right? So they identified an issue in Costa Rica related to contract liabilities and a couple other things, and that caused their audited report to be published all the way in November when it was due from the end of March. They got suspended as a result, right? Their 2022 net profit was restated from $8 million US to around $2.5 million US. That's a significant haircut. Now, put in the context, if the restatements happen in Jamaica Broilers and it's been USA being a material subsidiary, for the analysts, they're going to have to refactor, the restatements into their analysis and models. So for me, JBG is still fundamentally sound business, especially from the perspective of, the Jamaican business equates more to the Caribbean, the hyper business, the growth of more QSR. So, we're seeing the re-entry of churches, Texas chicken back into Jamaica. We have Verchek opening, we have Quick Chick opening, KS with more locations. We have more than 2,000 hotel rooms coming on board over the next 5 years. So in the Jamaican perspective, there's a lot of growth. And even amidst the confusion that's happening in the USA right now, people still have to eat. And Jamaica Broilers operates in a space that scale, efficiency, and just offering a good product and price will get to your sales. And people are going to always consume products, in this case, especially chicken, which is the world's most consumed meat. So from a fundamental standpoint, once they're able to give the public a true understanding as to where they really are and have some level of books that they can say, hey, this is what we have determined alongside their auditors. And by the way, they actually had an external third-party auditor from PwC USA to assist them in that review process up there. Then I'm sure that, the analysts will have a lot better perspectives, to give on Jamaica Broilers, because before COVID, it was trading around like $17, $19. It was hovering pretty tight around that price. And, in early January, it went as high as 41, probably a potential peak of $42. So the market has respected Jamaica Broilers, growth, especially from the USA perspective. Their tradition to exit Haiti, and the fact that they're exporting about 10% of their production in Jamaica to the rest of the Caribbean, Trinidad and elsewhere in between, it does tell you that, they have a lot of growth ahead of them. But for this current speed bump, I can say speed bump quite a pothole, because that's the honest reality. Getting over it.
It's a Jamaican pothole because it's big.
Yeah. Once I get over this and, they're able to give us some perspective as to what's going on, it can become a lot clearer for the community and the investing public to know, hey, we can gauge, relatively speaking, where this business is going and how they're growing. So last
Somebody
year,
in the comments said eggs are like Bitcoin in the US right now. They're so expensive. So that should have been an opportunity for broilers.
but remember, Kalila, they mentioned the fact that chicken prices also declined in the USA in the period under review from about 180 to 115. So while egg prices might have gone up, your chicken is a much more profitable product. So that just to give some context.
Were they hit by the bird flu? I heard that was one of the main reasons that that egg prices are so high right now in the US.
They didn't mention, any issues about bird flu, but they did mention the weather events a couple months ago and just the declining chicken prices. And even they're hit by the bird flu, in whichever part of operations they were, if they were hit, you know, I don't think it would have been a major reason for this significant drop that we're seeing right now in the segment results and even the profitability of the US business, because they have the processing plant, the feed mill, and all these other segments. So they're in that vertical segment of just the chicken process to process with chickens. But even with the potential bird flu, they would be benefiting from higher prices. So
Okay. Question from Ryan. Ryan wants to know how comes Broilers is allowed to host a private investor briefing for brokers and the media and not invite shareholders? Is this allowed under Jamaican law, especially since it involves material info?
Ryan, this is Jamaica. If a house is burning down and you call the fire department, somebody might tell you, "Hey, why you calling the fire department? The house is fine." So I experienced a Telegram group, and I said to people that, hey, for me, I prefer more open spaces where everybody can hear, and I do understand both perspectives, both from the company and the investor side. So to be honest, I think that it should have been something that was openly streamed to the public for the general public to appreciate that took place. But as it currently stands, between our Securities Act and even the weakness of the JSC's, rules, it's not a breach, to be honest, in that sense. Like, you have companies like Pulse and Purity that publish quarterly results every quarter without an MD&A. And it's just the reality of our market. We don't have strong disclosure requirements, and a lot of persons were very confused as to why Jamaica Broilers just a very limited commentary on the US operational issues in their quarterly report that was published last Thursday. So it's just the reality of our market. You have deficiencies, and the persons who have some level of clout don't see it as a benefit to improve these things.
Okay. Well, we're going to have to leave it there for this evening, David. Thank you so much for your perspective as usual. I see people asking in the chat, basically they want to know if you're a millionaire by now. Somebody said that you invest in all of the companies on the stock exchange. A
so
lively discussion going on there about
so
your investments.
so just one comment. So back in 2020, I rated the deficiencies that happened at the JSC, and as a contingency measure, I just bought a share in every company. So as a result, sometimes when the JSC forgets to post things on the website, I'll get things in the mail from the JCSD, which can act as the backup measure. So, there's still issues that happen with the JSC. Like, for example, last year MPC sent their annual AGM notice to the JSC. It was posted on the website, but I got it in the mail. So it's a contingency measure for the weakness at the JSC, in my opinion. And it doesn't mean that I'm bullish at every company in JSC. It's just a way for me to hedge against the deficiencies at the JSC in terms of communication and information to the general website and just processing information to the public.
Oh, okay. I get it. All right. Well, thanks for that information, David. We're going to wrap it there. We'll talk again soon.